Hi, everyone. It's Tina Ramirez, and I am really excited to have a good friend of mine here with us today. Her name is Zainab Al-Suwaij, and Zainab and I, we were just talking about how long we've known each other. It's been about 2 decades, and it's been such an honor to work with Zainab over all of these years. Zainab started really getting involved in the Middle East and working with youth around the Middle East, really inspiring so many of the young activists that ended up being engaged in the Egyptian revolution and revolutions all over the region to really fight for democracy and freedom and dignity for all people, not just one community. Right after, starting kind of after 9/11. Before that, she was a professor at Yale University teaching Middle Eastern literature. And Zainab is just one of my heroes. I love the work she does. She actually sits on our advisory board at Hardwired as well. And so it's just an honor to have you here, Zainab. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Tina. The honor is mine. And I still do remember the days that we are working together on several cases to help people in the Middle East, whether getting out of jail or being released from some sort of dictatorship. And your help there was tremendous since day one, and it's really appreciated. So people need to know that about how hard you have worked to give freedom to people, to many people around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Zainab. Well, yes, we've had many journeys and many fascinating cases. We're going to get into all of that today. I'm excited because these are stories that most people probably will never hear in the news, will never know. And so it's exciting for me to be able to kind of put a face behind the person that was really responsible for so much change in the world, positive change. And so I'm excited. All right, well, Zainab, let's get started by first, I just want people to know about you. I know you from your work with the American Islamic Congress as its president and founder, and all the work you've done in the Middle East. But tell me about your family, your background, the country you're from, a little bit about something that people might not know about you, and really what inspired you to get involved in the work that you're doing today.
Well, I am originally from Iraq. I grew up there under the dictatorship of Saddam Hussein. And when you grow up in a dictatorship atmosphere, you are definitely being involved in politics, whether you like it or not. Being on the quiet side, being oppressed as a citizen of that country, not being able to be yourself or speak up your mind, it was very difficult for a young person to live under that kind of pressure. Add to that pressure, my grandfather was a leader, and a religious leader in the community. He has many followers. He has over 50,000 followers, and I was his first granddaughter, so he took me and raised me. And of course, when you're raised in a household like that, you have to be a role model for the rest of the followers. So there were certain rules and certain regulations. Even though I grew up my grandfather was a deputy of Ayatollah Sistani in the southern part of Iraq. So that gives a lot of responsibility and a lot of responsibility towards his own followers and people. And we as a family, we have to follow certain rules and regulations. What I have grown up in the household that I have grown up in worked as a community center, not as only a house for a family, because every problem that these followers have, happy issues, sadness, death, weddings, we have to be involved. Add to that all the other things. So it's become for me at an early age to realize the responsibility of each individual as a person to help others in the community, not only nationally, but internationally. And the thing that my grandparents left in me is that whenever you can help people. And this is like a gift from God, because when you can help people, it's an indirect help from God to people on earth. So I took this and I kept it in my mind and in my heart, and whenever I could help people, I run into that. Unfortunately, the atmosphere outside the house was not like that. Being under dictatorship, atrocities, killing, torturing people. It was not an easy situation to grow up in an atmosphere filled with that much of hatred, that much of tension, that much of blood.
And Zainab,
So,
just really quick, a lot of people really don't understand the climate of fear that existed in Iraq at the time. So give me an example of something that would have happened then, you know, in your community. Somebody says something wrong,
sure.
and then what happens to them, or somebody, you know, give us a real example of that, because I think people so easily forget
these kind of things, right?
Yeah.
Tina, my earliest memories, I was in third grade. I was only 9 years old, and one of my classmates said, at that time, Iraq was in a war with Iran. And we have one of our teacher was absent, so we were playing, and she said, "Oh, I don't know, and I don't know why there is a war. We just want to play. We don't want a war." The next day, she disappeared with her whole family from the neighborhood.
Your 9-year-old friend.
9-year-old in school.
And
said
can you give us an idea of what, she wasn't just disappeared, what probably happened to her and her family?
Well, happened after we finished that day of school. The next day, she lives in the neighborhood. So we went home. A couple of hours later, the police came to her house and confiscated everything, and they took the whole family away. And we never saw them again. I have a cousin who was in high school, get arrested, and we don't know why at that time. And he was only 17 years old. And they took him away, and they killed him. And when we asked about him, they said, well, he was against the government, and issues like that. And so it's simple as, you know, someone who doesn't like you, they go to the government or to the police, and you know, the private police there, and they tell them, you know, this person said such and such, and they don't even, there is no court, there is no evidence, there is no, it just, you know, he said, she said, and people get disappeared.
So at a very early age, I mean, my daughter's only 6 years old, and
right.
I mean, you can't even imagine. So at a very early age, literally, you're censoring what you say, what you do,
right.
who you talk to. You're just living in constant fear, because I know from a good friend of mine who's from Kurdistan, her father was hanged by his hands on a fan.
A fan, right? That was very common.
Very twisted around the fan. Yeah. He was put in a bath of blood, forced to, like, drowned in it several times. I mean, the types of things that happen. We know about human shredders that Saddam put people down.
These things I have seen, Tina. I will tell you the story when the uprising happened in 1991. My parents left Iraq to live in Kuwait because of atrocities in 1982. I decided to stay with my grandparents because they raised me. For 8 years, I was not able to see my parents or my siblings. And then I went to see them for the first time in 1990. 2 weeks later, Saddam invaded Kuwait. So I saw the atrocities that not only on Iraqis inside Iraq, but also on people of other countries. Killing, raping women, stealing, theft. I mean, atrocities everywhere in a country that it's very small, and they haven't done anything to Saddam or his regime. So at that time, I felt, you know, when I left Iraq is a new start, and I'm not going to go back. But the invasion happened of Kuwait, and that was another eye-opener to see what happened. So I went back to Iraq. I was very angry. I was in my high school, last year in high school, and the uprising happened against Saddam Hussein. We were listening to Radio of America, and they said, you know, the Iraqi people want, you know, to be liberated. We will help them. I was one of the first people who ran in the street, and especially at that time, only men in the street, young guys and men, but not women. So I was one of the first women to be out there because I wanted freedom. And I saw the atrocities not only in Iraq, but also outside Iraq by the same regime. And we
But
were
you
able
knew
to,
when you ran out in the streets, I mean, I think that's why it's so important to have this context. You were risking your life in doing that.
definitely. They were shooting at us. They were, the regime was, they sent the army. Some of the army was in Kuwait because of the invasion, but there were internal police and army. But shortly after that, it took us a few hours until they surrendered and they gave their weapons and they joined the uprising. All of these forces. They felt it's a really a genuine, genuine uprising, and people want to get rid of Saddam and his atrocities. And we have to be one hand to united against that dictator to be able to have freedom. A lot of people get killed, many young people. In the city we have a huge mosque. And so I opened the doors of the mosque to have all of these people who've been wounded to be treated in the mosque. So we turned it into a small hospital because the hospital is far away and we're not being able to reach that at that time. Then I went and some of the guys, a couple of guys said, well, the political prison is just close here. And there are so many thousands of people out there. How about we go help them get out? So I joined 3 other guys and I went to the prison and we start opening the cells and getting people out of jail. And that was a moment that I will never forget, Tina. So many people, they've been living there for so many years under a very inhumanitarian condition, inhumane. You cannot, the smell, the place, the filthiness, there is no sun. And then accidentally I walked into the torture chamber. And when I walked into the torture chamber, there was tools, blood everywhere. The smell was bad. Tools that they use for torture, poking nails, chains with, hanged up in at the wall, at the ceiling, human meat grinders, chemical baths that they dissolve people in, so many different things. So we are opening these cells and we're letting people out. Some people are not in a full good psychological well-being. Some they lost their mind. Some of them were depressed. I mean, some of them were sick. The healthy ones that we got out, they've been able to communicate. They didn't realize what's happening. I said, what happened? Why we are out? And is the king died? So they are there since the king was Iraq was a kingdom in 1950 something. Anyway, we get them out, and not all the Iraqis, believe it or not. There are people from other nationalities as well. There are some Egyptians. There is one Kuwaiti guy. And when he saw me and I said, and he said, are you Kuwaiti? And I said, no, I'm not, but why you are asking? And he's like, I am Kuwaiti. And I said, what are you doing here? He said, they took me as my brother is, they took him as a hostage and I came to visit him. And then I wanted to get a permission to visit him the next month. They came to the hotel. They told me, the forces told me, come with us. It's going to be only half an hour. And I've been here for 4 months. I've been tortured every day. So the minute we took him out of the cell, the prison cell, to the sun, he fainted because he haven't seen the sun in so long. Took him to the hospital and treated him. And he's like, what am I going to do? And I said, look, Kuwait has been liberated. And we are in an uprising against Saddam Hussein, and we don't know what's going to happen to us. So what I advise you to do is we're going to send you to where the American international forces are, and you go there and you explain to them your situation, and tell them you're not in Iraq, you're Kuwaiti, maybe they can help you reunite with your family or go back to Kuwait. Anyway, I gave him money, I gave him clothes. He went, and I don't know if he made it or not, but that was one of these stories. So as the days goes by, the agreement of withdrawing from Kuwait happened in the southern part of Iraq, and the American forces decided not to continue the job and liberate Iraq at that time from Saddam, and we were trapped. So Saddam gathered his troops back and start bombing us and killing all the people who are joined the uprising. 250,000 people were killed, massive graves, and prisons were filled. I was injured and I was hiding for 3 months until I managed to leave Iraq afterwards. When I was heading out of Iraq, I felt it's a new start. But at the border, how I left, it was very interesting because I was going toward Jordan. And luckily at that time, there were no computers. There were these index cards that they write your name on. And if there is an index card says you are wanted by the government, or you are, they indicate the punishment that you have to be given if you have done something. So my index card said, Zainab Al-Suwaij, and killed at the spot. And of course, this kind of things was, luckily I had, $200. I gave it to the officer. He stamped my passport and turned that card, and I left. Definitely it was a new start for me. I didn't want to look back because it was too painful to leave people who joined you for at least 2 weeks to see freedom in Iraq at that time, and then to leave after a few months just seeking life, basically.
And your hopes of overturning this regime were just crushed at that moment, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. At that, you put all of your hopes and all of your wishes as you have a democratic government, you have a peaceful life to live there. It was just demolished.
Well, and this was the first Persian Gulf War, right? So after that, Saddam unleashed just chemical warfare against the Kurds, against so many other people. And so then
absolutely,
it was horrific. And so then we had the no-fly zone over Kurdistan, and we had, another 10 years until really 9/11. And then finally, people gained their freedom. So you were in America. Eventually, I guess you got to the United States and were working. What motivated you to then go back in? And when we finally did go in 2003, 2004, to take down Saddam Hussein.
Well, before that, I was, Iraq was in my heart, but it was so difficult to think about it because of the pain that it's in Iraq, because of the people I have left there. And what would have motivated me to go back is what I have seen, the type of freedom and democracy here in the United States, and how important it is to go and bring that back to Iraq. Iraq was in so much need for it. People were suffering, whether they are Muslim or non-Muslims, Shia, Sunnis, Kurds, Arabs, Christians, Mandais, Yazidis, you name it. Saddam was very just in terms of how he spread his atrocities among all of these people. So no one was really, if you don't agree on everything he wants and he says, then the whole, not only that individual, but the whole community has been destroyed. I wanted to go back and help people. So my first project was on education and how to help develop the education system in Iraq. And one important other issue was women's rights. Especially Iraq is starting a new government, Iraq has the community is dominated by men. Also, a lot of boundaries, cultural boundaries, religious boundaries, tribal boundaries, and all of these boundaries only applies on women for some reason. So I went back, and I was.
What year was it when you finally went back, Zainab?
2003.
Okay. Wow. It was still chaotic then. I mean, that was still a difficult time.
It was very difficult. The first meeting, the first time I went there, it was to southern Iraq. And when I entered the city, my city, and before it, I went for a meeting with the government and how important it is for us to have to project women's voice in there. So went back, and then in June of 2003, I went back and started working on a project. And I was, it was very difficult to see a woman in the street again, because it was very chaotic and security was very low. There is no government. But I wanted a team, and I wanted to help rebuilding the education system. So I created a team of 120 men and about 30 women, and they were my team to help rehabilitation of school system and education in Iraq. And it went very well. We started from southern Iraq all the way to Kurdistan area. And it was wonderful, especially when things started appealing to have women's rights and women's voice being heard.
So when you were rehabilitating these schools, explain to me what that looked like. Was it just getting the schools back up and running, or was it within the schools getting up and running, actually ensuring that they were teaching democratic principles?
So the schools was part of the project was rebuilding the schools, because there are so many schools have been demolished and not really a place for learning. Second thing was retraining the teachers, because they've been cut off the whole world at that time, and cut up from the whole world. Any developed or updated knowledge, or in terms of teaching methods or materials or education, they've been isolated from. There is no internet. There is internet, but the government will not allow you to access anything. And teachers were like, they are teaching methods of 60s and 70s, and it didn't develop after that. So we trained about 60,000 teachers. We worked on about over 4,000 schools. And also we opened schools for kids who left the education. We did a survey on kids who've been, who left the schools, because at that time was embargo in Iraq. So the family most likely to send the son, but not the daughter, or they cannot afford to send their kids to schools. So we opened these schools throughout the country to help the kids who left school to go back with an accelerated learning program. And this accelerated learning program take them to a second or third grade to be able to join the public school later on, because the public school cannot accept kids who are above 6 years old to join first grade. So we gave them the push in terms of to reach that level of education, second or third or fourth grade, in about a year and a half, and then join the regular schools later on. Working on curriculum as well, working on education, whether science, literature, as well as democracy and human rights, and respecting people of other faith and religions. All of these things were part of the program. So the program took Zainab, a few years.
This was so important, because I know just in my work in Mosul with children post-ISIS is that, I mean, no different than under Saddam, they were brainwashed to hate and to have divisions, to be willing to kill. I mean, Saddam moved people around and divided society. That was how he was able to stay in power for so long. And so,
and I think the recent also visit of the Pope, Pope Francis to Iraq, that brought a lot of stability, a lot of peace into people,
like,
whether they are Christian or Muslims or non-Muslims, it doesn't matter. But I think him being there brought a lot of peace with him on that level.
He sat down with the Shia leader of Iraq.
Right. Right.
That was amazing. And I
that
think
was a huge, because
I don't think people understand how big that is. Tell us why that was so.
I think it's definitely a huge, and it's a big message to the whole world, is that despite we are the leaders of definitely two different faith, but both of us are religious leaders. Both of us have our own way in our community and in our faith. And we are telling you, when they are holding each other's hand, that was a huge message. That was humanity is above everything.
It's so true.
And this is definitely for Muslim and non-Muslims to hear it and to see it. We are on a human level standing here. We want peace. We want just. We want equality for our people. And the leadership agreed on that. So let the people learn that lesson.
Well, and one of the things that Saddam has done for so many years was divide these religious communities, these different communities. Right. And the Shia Sunni conflict, it's historic in Iraq because that's where the Shia community began. So these divisions are very deep. But for the Pope to make a gesture in a way that said, we need to begin to see the humanity of one another and heal and work together towards unity in Iraq is extremely symbolic. Let's move forward. This is the key to helping generational change and overcome. There's generations and generations of intolerance and fear and hatred and so much that's happened in Iraq. And that's really what is going to be changing this society in the country and bringing people hope for the future. Right. But so Zainab, since we don't have a lot of time, I want to turn to Egypt and the Egyptian revolution, but really the Arab Spring. So you and I got to work together on a case. Your AIC approached me when I was a staffer on the Hill, a foreign policy staffer, and said, hey, there's this guy, he's that worked with us. He attended your trainings. He spoke out too much. He was going to be imprisoned. He was on trial. And you were terrified that he would never be heard from again in Egypt, because what happened in Egypt under Mubarak was that they speak up, the government doesn't like you, and you're not just disappeared, you're tortured and until the point where you have no more humanity left, you're killed. So Absolutely. You told me about this young man. I worked on his case. He ended up.
Yes, you were a tremendous help for us at that time, especially in his case. I remember every American official going to Egypt, you were going there and asking to help him. And we did a big campaign for him. He was released and,
Well, he was supposed to be in prison for like 10 years. And
right.
in the end, I think he got 4 years. And the funny thing was, he literally was there as long as I was on the Hill. And so I never stopped advocating for him, talking to the Egyptian government, saying, we know he's not being treated well, you need to fix that. And so the one thing that people don't understand is that dictators often try to just wait you out, because in Congress, you're there for 2 years, you leave, staffers change. But for 4 years, by the grace of God, I was there and I was on top of his case.
Absolutely.
They knew Absolutely. I am not going away, and I didn't go away. And Karim Abdul-Maher, he was speaking out. The reason he was in prison in the first place, for people to understand, is that he was speaking out in defense of persecuted Christians. Here is a young Muslim democracy advocate that you've trained hundreds and thousands of these around the world. He was standing up in defense of people that weren't of his faith. And he was saying, look, what's happening at Al-Azhar University, the main university in Egypt, is wrong. It's actually radicalizing people and making them hateful and intolerant of others and violent. We need to stop this. And for that simple act, he was imprisoned. And for 4 years, he lost 4 years of his life in prison. But we were able, through our advocacy, to ensure that he wasn't forgotten. He was released literally like just moments before the Egyptian revolution. And
Correct.
I remember hearing about him being the one standing next to the church, which is why the Egyptian revolution started. The church was attacked, and these Muslim youth that you had trained came out, stood in front of the church and said, we are all Egyptian and we're standing in their defense. This is not what we want. And in that
Absolutely.
moment, hundreds of thousands, millions of people came together and started the Egyptian revolution. Zainab,
Correct.
you inspired this young man, you inspired thousands of young people across the region, and it led to the Arab Spring. So we're 10 years in.
It is just like yesterday. You know, these young people, you know, Karim Amr was among them. We gathered them in 2006 in Egypt, in Cairo, and the secret police were all over us. There were 60 of them from all over the Middle East and North Africa. And these young people were amazing, full of energy. They were bloggers. Blogging just started, you know, the internet is just started in that area. And these kids are full of energy, full of, you know, they are noticing all of these atrocities of government and dictatorship and no rights, and people are not being able to express their feelings and thoughts and ideas. The movement of radicalization isn't there, up in the air. So many of these young people have no way to turn to. Whether you will be a slave of the government or you will be radicalized. I mean, there is no middle ground in there. So we decided at the AIC to do a conference for youth activists in the Middle East. Oh boy, Tina, that was an amazing experience. This whole week when we spent it in Cairo, the secret police were all over us. The minute we meet with a student to do the lectures, the secret police goes to their room and try to search for anything, evidence, so they can take these young people into trials and stuff like that. And they interrogate me at the end of the day, telling me, you know, what are you teaching them? And I said, well, come and see what we are teaching them. We're teaching them about freedom. We're teaching them about, is that against the government? And I said, well, freedom, God created people as free human beings. So we are, you know, just educating them. Anyway, it was a very difficult a week conference. And Karim was one of among these young people. And he was very quiet, very shy. But he was very smart young man, and his family unfortunately was radicalized, and his father was pushing him to go to one of the religious schools to be a religious leader. But Karim, when he went to that school, he found out that these people are so radicalized, even more than his dad, and they are, you know, this is a school basically to teach radicalization around. So he started criticizing that, and he wrote about it, and definitely that opened a lot of fire against him. Unfortunately, he paid it with a heavy price in being in jail for several years. You tried in a different, from different directions. Your help was, you know, amazing to his case. We, you know, helped him in a campaign. We tried our best, but couldn't save him from being in jail. And then he was released just before the revolution started. The thing is, which was good, is that so many of these young people we have trained before the revolution, and it was just an eye-opener to see how much you could do to the power of having young people understand the concept of freedom and democracy, and how important it is. You know, being under that kind of a dictatorship. That goes back to my story. You know, I grew up under dictatorship, but I didn't have the opportunity that someone teaching me about democracy or giving me that help. We were blessed that we had the tools to work with these young people and to open their eyes and their horizon to participate, and also to learn and teach other people that we are the people, we have the voice, we have the tools, and we can make the change.
And so after Iraq, I mean, it's so amazing because you must have been inspired. We're not just going to stop here. You ended up training thousands of youth, not just in Egypt,
but all over
Tunisia, Libya. I mean, you name it. I mean, and
we had about 14 countries in the region.
Wow.
And we had over 16,000 young people that we have worked with.
And
our program,
one example of one of the kids that literally helped inspire a revolution, that toppled a dictatorship.
I'll show you one thing that I have here. I think our comic book that we have translated into Arabic is the Montgomery bus boycott. We have, let me see if I have a copy.
Oh, wow. The Montgomery bus boycott.
Yes.
Oh, that's so neat. I just think it's amazing how for, really since 2003. So for the last 18 years, you have been inspiring them. So Martin Luther King's ideas.
Right. And that was what
peaceful, nonviolent protest. Understand that you have inherent human dignity, inalienable rights, equal rights, whether you're a man or a woman, whatever ethnicity, race, religion you are. And that's what's inspiring these young people to stand up, not just for themselves or for their own community, but for everyone.
Definitely. And that was the book that been held during the demonstration in the street during the Arab Spring in Egypt. Wow. And it was very powerful to see that we have planted something and people being able to make that change. So
what kind of reflections do you have, 10 years on? Do you feel like they're going in the right direction? Is this just the beginning?
Definitely. And if we're looking at the case of Tunisia, did very well. They learned and they kept, the experience they have learned, and they are emerging. Democracy is not a pill you take and you become democratic. Definitely, it's a process, needs a long time. People learn because it's new to communities in the Middle East and the Arab world. So needs a long time. Look how many years took us here in this country to become democratic country. And the process, the change, this and that, I mean, all of that, it's a process need to happen gradually. And after 10 years, I think the Arab Spring was a call. It was a respond to a lack of freedom, a respond to demolish dictatorship in the region, and for the people to be able to express themselves in that way. It was, it changed the whole region, made these dictators, think about the future, think about what would happen to them if the people united against them. In some cases, Arab Spring was a success. In other cases, unfortunately, it didn't go very far away. People got tired. There is not that much of a support. Also, they didn't know how to deal with it afterwards. So, some of them end up great, and some others did not. But the experience of it, it's there. The experience of being able to project your voice and you say no to a dictatorship, no to these kind of atrocities that are happening on the ground. I think everyone have learned from it. And this is the lesson that we take out with us for so long and so many generations to come.
Well, and Zainab, it goes back to what you said, which is that democracy is not a pill that you take and all of a sudden you get it. And I think we've seen that in Iraq. And that's why I think the work that you did planting those seeds with education early on were so important, because they always say if you want a tree today, you needed to plant the seed 10 years ago. And so we're 20 years in, those are the kinds of seeds that we need to be planting, and understand that you tend them, you water them, you walk with them. You don't just plant a seed and ignore it. And
Absolutely.
that's really the important lesson of democracy and of human freedom. If you look anywhere in the world, whether it's from your work in Darfur and in Sudan or in Iraq or Egypt or anywhere else. So I want to turn just finally to one more thing, because it's so important. The youth in America.
Mm-hmm.
So you have had such a rich experience, and I mean, seen things and witnessed things that most people can't even imagine.
Right.
And you come to America, and a lot of the youth are advocating for, everything under the sun. And, a lot of Muslim youth might feel very confused by what happened in the Middle East as well. What have you been doing to really engage those youth in America and to help them have an alternative voice, really, to kind of the chatter that's out there that says, if you're a Muslim, you have to think a certain way, because you certainly are thinking outside the box your whole life. So I love the work that you do here with youth. I just love for people to hear a little bit more about it.
Tina, it's very important that we see outside the need for youth to be educated and to be mobilized and all of that. And I looked at our college campuses and youth here in the United States, American youth, Muslim youth, whether youth they are Muslims or not Muslims, and there is that vacuum of kids here. They enjoy democracy, freedom, but also, unfortunately, they are in a very dangerous space because they're also voices of hatred, voices of extremism. And this is unfortunately happening in college campuses, in different communities. So I felt that danger, and we wanted to grant them the help that we gave to other youth around the world. We said, our American youth here also, they need that help. So we started a project on college campuses called Project Noor. And Project Noor is basically an alternative voice to students on college campus to create their own space to be activists and to have a voice against radicalism, on human rights and civil rights issues, on minority rights, and so on and so forth. So we started Project Noor, and at that time, there is a lot of, we started as a pilot project in 2 college campuses here in Washington. And for our first event at that time, we wanted to talk about how to get students together from different faiths. And it was Ramadan, and people were fasting, and we're talking about fasting in different faiths. So we had Muslim, Christian, Jewish, people of other faith, all in one place. And Muslim radicals on one of the college campuses wanted to protest our event for several reasons. And you're probably going to ask why. One of the reasons is that we're bringing men and women together in one place. Second reason was, why do we invite people of non-Muslim background? Third reason, we are working on Darfur, and Darfur was a conspiracy, it was not a real issue. And we end up in an event of 100 people, and this event actually went very well. It was an amazing event where a lot of people attended it and benefited from it. This sparked the program to spread around the country with 127 chapters around the US. Definitely, there are a lot of challenges. We have looked into the infrastructure within these college campuses. We saw some of the kids being radicalized, unfortunately. We felt it's important that we go beyond college campuses. We need to go to community centers, religious centers, and talk to leadership. So we start reaching out to different religious communities and to mosques, to religious centers, and so on and so forth. Talking to imams, talking to sheikhs, and the danger of our children being out there with all of these radicalized people wanted to grab them to their side. And I give you an example happened here in Virginia. A few years ago, I reached to one of the Islamic centers, and I told them, we have this program. We wanted to make sure that the youth in the community are safe and sound and not being radicalized one way or another. So the response from the imam, he said, we don't have that in our community. We are perfectly fine. We're away from this kind of things and so on and so forth. So we don't want, and I said, okay, how about we give them an educational, lecture one day for the families, for the youth, for the whole community. And he's like, no, we don't need that. Anyway, a month later, I received a call from him around midnight. And he said, we have a problem. And I said, I thought you don't have any problems in that. And he's like, one of the youth left a letter for his father, and he left to join ISIS. That was a red flag that out there, and he was furious. The family was definitely very upset. So I told him, let's talk about it. So I went and I started talking to him and to the family, and we find out this young kid get radicalized through the internet. And they convinced him to go. So of course we contacted the FBI and all of that, and we start the process. And the fear now is not that kids that we have who had left, but the kids who are still there and they have associated with him. So definitely these kind of things are very contagious. And we started to work with these young people on a process of sessions every week to make sure that they are safe, they are not, being brainwashed by these radical movements that happen. And that opened other doors for us with other community centers to do that. The students who have trained in our conferences, and we were very thankful that I have joined us a few times to talk to them about these issues. They actually joined the group and start talking to these young people around. So each chapter in different college campus, they go and reach out to their community and talk about the atrocities of these kind of things and how much it's going to affect and impact the community and young people and their future and so on. We bring these young people to once a year to Washington, D.C. to have a conference to meet with officials on Congress and at the White House, at State Department and so on and so forth, to learn about the democratic system, to learn about the process, how to build yourself as a leader in your community or as an activist in a very developed way, and you have that connection, you learn about the system, you learn about the rules, and it's important to have that voice projected. Also, how to be advocates for people who are deprived from their rights, whether they are in the Middle East or they are here, how to help minorities, how to help individuals. This is definitely all in a course to help rebuild these kind of personalities and leadership skills with these young people.
Zainab, I'm always just so encouraged, and I think that everybody should be by, just from start to finish, the courage you had to stand up, first of all, 1991 to today, and every day of your life to stand up for the dignity and freedom of all people. And so I'm just, I'm always amazed at the work you're doing. I hope
Thank you.
I was actually somewhere this week and I was telling another Muslim organization, I'm like, you guys need to reach out to Zainab and help your youth. And it's just really encouraging. I think these are resources that people need to be aware of and need to know, because so often we don't hear these things in the news. We don't hear the stories of hope and of what's happening that's actually planting those seeds that's changing cultures and the ways people are thinking, and helping people really actually start down the path towards freedom and dignity. And so thank you for everything you've done. I love you, and I'm just so
appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I appreciate your help. And, throughout the years, the courage that you have put, the amount of hours and times that we called you in the middle of the night and I'm like, look, there's such and such, and you are just like on the phone all over and trying to save people, trying to make life better for many individuals around the world. And you continue to do that now, and on so many different levels. So I appreciate it. It's a responsibility. This responsibility is upon all of us, not only Tina, not only Zainab, but it's concerning every individual, that we have to take the initiative. We have to take the leadership to help people in need. And there are so many people in need all over the world. Sometimes it would be our next door neighbor, and sometimes a person who is thousands of miles away from us. But what's right is right. And these kind of initiative, this kind of help, this kind of education will not go divine. There is always a result of that. And people like yourself, Tina, should be very proud of what you have done and what you have accomplished, and how many people around the world that you have helped. So thank you, and I appreciate, and I look forward for the upcoming years that we can work together to help other individuals around the world.
20 years from now, the world's going to look even more different.